Welcome back, everybody. I'm Wyatt Darby here with Joe Lissette, and we're in round 6 of 7 for our 5K trial here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Playing some more Modern today, and we're kind of in winning in time. So we're going to be seeing a couple pretty good matches this round. I think our main feature is actually going to be Amulet Titan versus Jund, a matchup that we've seen for a long time, and we actually saw it earlier today where Jund snuck out a pretty close victory.
Yeah, and that's certainly not maybe the expected result. I feel like Jund's battling uphill in this matchup, and we have Peter Oakes and Steve Brockmeyer, two players who haven't seen. I don't know if they're newer or if they're local to here, but these are not players. We've seen some players from the NRG Championship littered throughout the event. These are players who are less accomplished on the series, but looking to put up their names today. So we'll see how this finishes up. We have some players who are we're in now at the point where some players are probably drawing in at the top tables. Maybe just one match, maybe two, and then everyone else is playing to hopefully lock up a spot.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Just for our player Steve to be playing Jund in general, it feels like really the talk of Modern right now does seem to be the Dryad of the Isilian Grove kind of Primeval Titan decks, and kind of my experience with Jund over the years is if your opponent ever puts a Primeval Titan in play, it's just such uphill sledding, and there's not that many tools beyond Thoughtseizes and maybe some timely land destruction to actually completely stop that from happening.
No, it's gonna be tough, and this is a spot where even with this card, Amulet will assemble their land, and then they have so many virtual Titans in the deck, and they just draw one. You can be kind of ahead on the board, and then just your setup just collapses immediately under lightning bolts or zombies, whatever they feel like doing with their lands.
Yeah, and curious to see if there's any kind of crazy extreme hate in Steve's sideboard. We don't have the deck list quite yet, but I've heard some rumblings of people casting Boil to really punish the Dryad, making lands all types, and
that would be something else. Last time was a long round. You guys were in here for quite a while. I got to enjoy my lunch already. You're still waiting on that, but we'll see if the players can put up another round like last time. We'll see if you go in starvation mode in here at the table.
Yeah, if I pass out, I think solo commentary is totally in your range. So,
what was it? What were the highlights of the last round that took so long?
Yeah, so we watched. If you just came back, we watched Sultai Snow against Abzan Heliod combo. So the last game was a really interesting back and forth where the Abzan deck was really close to leveraging, just enough aggression to win, but it was kind of getting exactly offset by Uro. And, you had a situation where Ranger captains were blocking, certain spells from getting cast and really limiting how our Sultai player was able to interact. And it was a situation where I think if they had about one or two more turns, Sultai would have won. But, that's definitely a risk you take when you play a control deck and one that, does have some good win conditions, but has to play defense for a lot of early turns.
Sure, that sounds interesting. Well, hopefully we have some stuff this round to match that. I know the previous round when you were off, we had a great round, really interesting matches. Sounds like you did pretty well this round. So let's see if we can go 3 in a row here with exciting stuff for you guys to watch here at Nerd Rage Gaming.
Yeah, and let's take it down to the table. I think our players are just about ready to go. And, yeah, we see Steve Brockmeyer on the right against Peter Oakes playing Amulet. And pretty interesting start. Looks like Steve's just in the tank a little bit about which card to maybe send back with a mulligan. It's tough. In the blind in Modern, the value of, say, a Lightning Bolt in your opening hand is excellent, but, some decks can kind of blanket, and depending on what our Amulet player's opening hand is, that Lightning Bolt might not do much.
Yeah, definitely. It's really, what are we trying to kill? Sakura Tribe Scout or Azusa, and then if not that, nothing. It's either great or terrible, and there's no way to know. And looks like this time around, it would be terrible. We're looking at lands and Amulet and Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, the Dryad in there as well.
And the Dryad is 4 toughness, right? So the Bolt doesn't do anything there either.
Yeah, the problematic thing against Azusa is your opponent still has an opportunity to make some land drops even with the Lightning Bolt. So some careful sequencing can really dodge that. And still from Steve's side, being able to snipe that Amulet is pretty excellent. It's going to cut some of the most explosive potential away from Peter and should slow the game down to a pace that's a little bit more, amenable to Jund's speed.
All right, so both players mulliganed. Certainly the Amulet side looks like we've got definitely a functional hand. We have plenty of mana. Now we have a Primeval Titan, so we're set up. We just need to assemble 6 mana, which with the bounce lands and stuff is just eventually going to happen. We're not going to be interacting with lands in game 1 from the Jund side. So we either need to win or we need another discard spell.
Yeah, and that's tough, because Inquisition is a discard spell in the deck, but the fact that it doesn't hit Primeval Titan unless, you get the Summoner's Pack Pseudo Titan really does limit what Steve is looking at. And maybe his best card in this situation could be something like Liliana the Veil. It's a card that can kind of attack mana in a non-traditional way, and, if Peter plays out too many cards, then all of a sudden that Titan's at risk.
Sure. But certainly the easiest way to go is just to have a clock. Tarmogoyf would be good here. Let's see. Are we playing Dark Confidants? I know that's not too common anymore.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple copies of Croxa and Seasoned Pyromancer kind of in those flexible creature slots.
Okay, and we have Wrenn and 6, which is nice for generating card advantage and hitting land drops, but isn't going to get this game over with. Peter content to just play a land for the turn, pass back. Steve, the onus is on you. What do you have for us?
Yeah, I love a little bit of thin value as much as the next fellow, but yeah, Wrenn and 6 is just kind of completely dwarfed in this matchup, and it's kind of an interesting spot, right, where it's one of the best cards in your deck if you're playing something like Blue-White Control or an Infect style deck, but it's kind of close to zero text here.
Yeah, unless we can, and it's just building up to this ultimate is just unlikely to happen before Peter gets to the Titans running, and even if we do ultimate, the ultimate for Wrenn and 6 doesn't really affect the board all that much. Even what are we even hoping for? We have a lightning bolt or something? Like, if we can't just straight kill Peter with 6 lightning bolts, then controlling the board's not going to be really an option against a horde of zombies.
Yeah, it's possible, not super realistic, but Assassin's Trophy could provide repeated relevant interaction against lands.
Yeah.
But then again, you do also have to make sure you're answering the board as well. And Wrenn kind of, in a very slight way, at odds with Croxa, kind of keeping the graveyard a little bit smaller and making escaping that Titan slightly more difficult. And honestly, escaped Croxa, great combination of both, a clock and disruption. It actually seems, if you can get on the battlefield, a pretty relevant card here.
Yeah, Croxa does a lot of damage, and this is a new Dryad Legion Grove to replace the one that was Thoughtseized earlier, and then land drops aplenty, and everything seems like it's building up for Peter. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 land on the board, and if this Dryad lives, he can make the next 2 land drops if he has them. It looks like he does, and we may see the Titan come down.
Oh, and here we do see Wrenn actually letting Lightning Bolt trade up with that 4th toughness, and that's critical. That's going to buy Steve most likely a full turn cycle. And, it actually kind of gave some life into the Bolt that, it really seemed like it would have been dead otherwise.
Yeah, that was nice. They kind of combining 2 cards that we didn't think were going to do a whole lot into a full turn of value, which is great.
But even with that, the Amulet land drops keep chugging on, and Tarmogoyf is representing some solid damage. I suspect right now it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of, I think, a 5/6 with Artifact added from Amulet of Vigor. So the clock is ticking. But, that being said, it kind of needed to start 2 turns ago to have, to give Steve a really realistic shot here.
Yeah. So if we have, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3 extra cards in the graveyard right now. That is not, we're not there for Croxa yet, nor are we likely to get there this turn. I suppose we could thought these ourselves to turn it on, but that's unlikely to be the ideal play.
Yeah, and some possibilities Steve is mulling over if Raging Ravine is something that's worth activating here.
Yeah. So if we attack for 9 and then have the Wrenn 6 to shoot in the future, that's a couple more points. Oh, we're adjusting. Okay, so now it would be attack for 10.
Oh, with the enchantment from Dryad is the extra type that we missed there.
Okay, so he's coming in for 10 here.
Yeah, Jund doing its best burn impression, trying to, get every point of damage it can in. And it looks like Wrenn, I kind of like it starting to ping Peter and just get every bit of damage in, because next turn Peter can cast Primeval Titan, and that's going to put him up to 7 lands, which is going to turn on field. Yeah. So attacking on the ground is sort of turned off. Yeah, this Radiant Fountain actually
Radiant Fountain for the second time. Yeah, I mean, that's the second hit for this game. Otherwise, Peter would be at 7 right now. Instead, he's going to find himself at 11. Players checking life totals real quick, and then Primeval Titan comes down, and there's no more fun for Steve in this game.
Yeah, why don't we take a look at the card? For 4 green, it's a giant that's been kind of defying Modern for a long time now. It's a 6/6 with Trample, and whenever Primeval Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you can search your library for up to 2 land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. So it really ties the room together, getting all kinds of fantastic utility lands, enabling some machine gunning now that Valakut is in this deck, and I just think really one of the cornerstone cards of Modern at this point.
Yeah, and so fetch up, we get Field of the Dead and Bajugabog for 2 tokens, and then for the second time today, we see or at least in my rounds, we see Bajugabog target the owning player to shrink the opposing Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, I think really smart play by Peter, although a little bit counterintuitive, seeing that Kroxa hanging out in your opponent's graveyard, still valuing, I want to shrink this Tarmogoyf, and getting rid of my enchantment and my artifact is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. So, Steve, contemplating the turn, what do we do? Looks like we're going to pick a land up. Okay, we're just going to plus the Ren 6.
Yeah, I can kind of tell by body language. It looks like Steve's a little bit out of this one.
Yeah, that one could have. The Verdant Catacombs sitting on the board. It would have cost us a point of damage, but we could just have a free card in hand right now. So that was maybe not ideal, but then also probably not too relevant.
Yeah, and a lot of fantastic draws available for Peter as well. Teleria West is actually going to be picked up off of this bounce land, making a zombie, and giving Peter the option to, I suspect, get Summoner's Pact and have that Summoner's Pact get Dryad, which can then enable some Valakuts after this Primeval Titan attacks, and then the whole house of cards. It really just completely built. Is that a engineered explosives?
I think it's explosives, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense too. Getting the Goyf and Renin 6 out of the way, and putting Steve in a spot where he should be at 1 with this all said and done, and something like 5 lethal attackers in play. Yeah,
this is going to be hard to recover. So yeah, going to 10 that kills the fetch land. There's not going to be burn from the Amulet deck aside from eventual Valakuts, which may be able to finish things off, and that's if Steve can deal with the board, which at this point doesn't seem likely. Okay, so the board gets cleared away, or at least Steve's board gets cleared away.
Yeah, and Peter gets to kind of go all in on Field of the Dead, getting a copy of Vesuva to double down on that. And while Raging Ravine probably will ambush 1 zombie, there's just, now that this has been fully established, there's just too many. And this is, I think, exactly the ramifications of letting a Primeval Titan hit play. It just carries everything. Yeah, and I'm sure Steve would have done anything he could to stop this, but it's just, after the first Thoughtseize, there was no other interaction available to deal with future Primeval Titans, and now, like you were saying, once one hits, it almost doesn't even have to live, and this one actually is living and attacking again, and potentially a 3rd time next turn, or 2nd time next turn, and it's just not really, Steve with a bunch of cards that don't do anything, which could fairly describe basically his entire deck at that point in the game. Yeah, definitely we saw kind of the classic mid-range problem there. A lot of good cards, a lot of generically powerful ones in Steve's deck, but they don't quite line up right for this matchup, and that puts him in a bit of a hole. But that means that the mid-range deck tends to be the one that improves more by sideboarding, so why don't we take a look at what Steven can improve on. Looking at the sideboard, we see 2 copies of Fulminator Mage, 2 Plague Engineer, 1 Kalitas, Duress, Grafdigger's Cage, Nile Spellbomb, Collective Brutality to go along with 1 Abrupt Decay to go along with 2 Collective Brutality, 3 Ashiok Dream Render, and 1 Pillage. So I think Steve is actually very well prepared here. The combination of Ashiok, Fulminator Mage, and Pillage, that's a lot of 3-mana Amulet hate. Yeah, that's nice. That's a good selection of stuff. The Pillage in particular, I was actually wondering earlier today why are these decks playing Stone Rain and Pillage, and it was pointed out is because it gets around Veil of Summer, which we are likely to find in the opposing deck when we get to it, but still. So aside from land destruction package, I think Duress could come in, especially going first. I'm less confident going second, but going first you can pick off an Amulet or an extra Once Upon a Time maybe, although probably not a singleton copy, as would just get cast. Yeah, some windows to hit Summoner's Pact before your opponent can cast it. And actually, one other nice thing about Pillage, I think that card also has some text letting it kill artifacts. It does, so being able to hit Amulet of Vigor as well just is a little bit more flexibility that Fulminator Mage doesn't quite have. Yeah. The Peter sideboard for Amulet, we have 3 Ether Gust, 2 Engineered Explosives, 3 Dismember, 1 Veil of Summer, 1 Radiant Fountain, 1 Field of Dead, 2 Force of Vigor, 1 Tireless Tracker, and 1 Reclamation Sage.
So here we're looking kind of this is a matchup where we're ahead game one, and we're just trying to play against what the Jund deck is bringing in against us because we're already kind of ahead. We're already in good shape to start with. So what do we do where all these land destruction cards are red? So that means Ether Gust is probably fine. And what else do you think you want?
I do like the swap of maybe cutting your main deck Radiant Fountain for an extra copy of Field of Dead, or whatever your worst utility land might happen to be in this matchup. Tireless Tracker, I think, is always going to be an all-star against Jund. It's just really easy to make that into a pretty clean 3-for-1. And, 1 or 2 copies of Aether Gust, I think that makes sense, too, because there's a lot of hate that's red, but it also tags green cards, so it can buy you time against Goyf. Not particularly great against Bloodbraid Elf, because it'll still get the Cascade, but, I think solid flexibility and a card you might want a light touch of.
Do we think this catches the Jund sideboard? Does Jund catch up in sideboarding here, or are we still behind?
I think I actually would expect Jund to win on the play with this amount of hate, because it does give you the ability to play, discard spell, threats, and honestly, Ashiok is just kind of a fantastic aura against Primeval Titan. It gives you the ability to let it hit the battlefield, be a 6/6, and then kill it, and that sort of nullifies the kind of beginning of the cascade that we saw really let Peter run away. So why don't we jump down to it? Players are ready for game 2. And, yeah, I think Steve's going to be really capable of winning this game, but that being said, there's just so much raw power in Amulet that I think, Peter's definitely not dead either here.
Well, okay. I thought that was a mulligan, but apparently that was just kind of a fidgety hand, and that's okay. So Steve perhaps keeping, and Peter mulling, so okay. Going to 6. Amulet is a deck that probably mulligans pretty well, especially with the crew lands basically providing 2-for-1s as long as they're able to develop. And we have very redundant threats in this deck. That's kind of what this deck is all about, is redundant threats.
Yeah, really, it's hard with only having 4 copies of Primeval Titan. It's almost impossible to jam more functional copies. Once Upon a Time, fantastic there. Summoner's Pact and Teleria West combining. It's just the deck is so good at doing its game plan. We actually have seen it move away from back in the day, maybe a couple years ago now. We used to see Hive Mind floating around as a backup kill.
Yeah, that's true.
And, Amulet at this point just says, honestly, Primeval Titan's just always better, and it's just so much easier to find that one.
All right, so here we go, starting off Steve with a fetch land and some turn 1 play, ideally a Thoughtseize or some discard spell to remove a potential Amulet. Or Circular Tribe Spet. It's really tough because there aren't many cards that deal with Amulets, all of Amulet's enablers once they're on the board. But this card obviously takes care of them all preemptively.
Yeah, it seems like if you want to have an interactive spell in your deck as a Jund player for this matchup, Kolaghan's Command stands really kind of head and shoulders above the rest. And, Steven does have 2 copies of that in his main deck. So that's going to be one of the cards that, now that I know what I'm playing against, that is amongst the best possible cards to look for, besides some of those sideboard whammies like the Ashiok and Fulminators.
So we're looking at here, I think we have 3 land. Is that 2 explosives? I'm not sure what the middle card is.
Azusa, yeah.
Oh, that was an Azusa, okay. And plus the Primeval Titan. So that's a reasonable hand. Given that we didn't take the Azusa, I imagine we have some other way to deal with it.
Yeah, and so far, Steve's kind of lining this game up exactly as you'd like. Discard spell into Termagorph, the hardest-hitting threat available in Jund. And, that mountain kind of worries me. I do see Liliana the Veil in his hand, and if he can't cast that next turn, that can actually, really give Peter a little bit more time to maneuver and set up his hand and lands here. It's interesting. I think Basic Mountain is kind of the worst land in the deck by a lot. But, it does give you a little bit of extra life against burn if you don't have to shock for Lightning Bolt, and really fantastic against Blue-White control as well. We saw earlier Blue-White kind of run away with the game with, just lots of Field of Ruin.
All right, so you were right about the Liliana being stuck. It's actually it's not the second black source, it's the third land. Well, it's the third land overall, but 2 Tarmogoyfs is a lot. And we have the Azusa. Do we have an answer to the Azusa?
And interesting from Peter, he actually only had 1 additional land to play, which, if you're Steve, that kind of opens you up to maybe be a little bit more flexible. Azusa might not have to get killed if Peter apparently is out of extra land drops.
So any green source, I believe, is going to turn on Primeval Titan for next turn, as we need a second. Not just any land, because we need castle takes 2 green and 2 colors. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, are we actually? Cause, okay, we're not blocking with these. I didn't think so. It looked like we considered it for a second. So Peter at 10, and
I think that was a Dryad, which. Yeah, not really a ton either, but these are blockers, and Dryad's 4 toughness means that for now it's actually going to hold on to these Tarmogoyfs.
Right. Okay, Jund player. I think we have a Bloodbraid Elf in hand, and the Liliana that you spotted earlier. Do we have anything castable?
I think I saw an Ashiok as well, and it makes sense. A lot of Steve's best card in this matchup.
Yeah.
They do all cost 3 mana, and you'll keep a 2-lander. Your deck has 24 lands, sometimes even more than that. And Jund is not a deck with really card filtering or selection, so sometimes you just kind of miss a few times.
All right, well, here we come for probably 3 damage to the face after 1 Tarmogoyf gets blocked, and that is the end of the turn. Well, this is kind of a stumble from both sides.
Yeah, and here we do see Peter hit his extra land drop that he needs. That's a Primeval Titan, and because Dryad's in play, that's actually options for active Valakut and Field of the Dead. So you might see these Tarmogoyfs start to get mowed down here.
There's 1 Valakut pulled to the front, and to join it, we are going to see... Peter's going to make us wait to figure it out. All right.
It's interesting. Field is generically pretty good, but you do have a few incidental buys on the board that are kind of gumming up the works and stopping the Goyfs from really doing a ton. That being said, it looks like Peter actually wants the flexibility of another bounce, maybe going trying to pick up this copy of Tolaria West from
Yeah,
playing.
this seems pretty nice. So we'll get 2 shots with Valakut anyway, and then we'll be able to play more land drops and do a lot more.
Yeah, actually just a ton of damage.
And okay.
Yeah, you don't even need the combat step with Azusa and Dryad. That's an extra, 4 land drops?
When you have 4 land drops lined up, Steve at 11, yeah, 4 bolts, straight up dead. So that was that. And yeah, like Primeval Titan, it just has to exist. It doesn't have to do anything, and the game is just end.
Yeah, really kind of a tough game. We saw Steven have a lot of the tools that he needed, just wasn't quite able to cast it. But, that's rough. When your matchup's tough, you don't really have any room to stumble. I think he did his best to position himself well, but, sometimes you're going to lose to your bad matchups.
All right, we do have a backup matchup here. It's going to be Bill Caminos versus Austin Hoth. I actually I only watched a little bit of it, but Bill actually had an extremely long match last round, as well as your feature match that took forever. Bill played a very long game with his Wurza deck, and he's going to be facing here against Amulet. So we'll get to see the Amulet again. So the players apparently are still in game 1, so are we going live to the match this time? Okay, so we are going to go live down to the match, and we'll get you most of another full match in this round. Whenever production is ready, there we go. And so we see Primeval Titan in play again with quite a few lands, but this time being held off by an Ensnaring Bridge, it looks like.
Yeah, the lack of Dryad kind of turns off the alternate win condition. Valakut can ignore Ensnaring Bridge, but as long as the 2/4 can be kept off the battlefield, as long as these lands aren't actually all types, Bill can kind of keep the game at parity, and looks like he's top decking, although, honestly, Goblin Engineer, pretty powerful. Curious to see if Bill goes for a combo piece or a little bit of value here.
All right, so this Bill Camino's playing a 4-color Wurza. We have Goblin Engineer, we have Emery, we have Urza, and then the Word of Invention package for Thopter Sword, and pretty standard. We don't have any counters in this deck. This isn't like the Urza deck that we had earlier on camera this morning. This is just an artifact package, and then the combo package with value creatures is what this deck consists of. What do you got over there? Is this a pretty stock Titan deck, or do we have anything quirky going on?
Yeah, so far as I can tell, I suspect Austin's list is within a couple cards of our last Titan deck that we looked at. Just a really strong core of Azusa, the Dryad, Sakura Tribe Scout, lots of one-of utility lands. probably some highlights there. Henry Battlements replacing, was it Slayer's Stronghold? The deck is kind of moving away from needing those Boros lands and kind of doing that, but that's starting to become more and more of a common technology.
Sure. So this is actually at least the third different Urza deck during the matches that I've been in here today. We had the blue-black Urza kind of control deck, and then we had this here, which is more of the tutor package. And then we had a third deck that was kind of a combination that had the War of Invention package, but not the addition of the Goblin Engineer. So really, you can build these decks in a lot of different ways, which is nice for just developing the health of the format. I think when players can customize powerful cards to go alongside with however they want the decks to work.
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning the kind of like Urza breach decks that are starting to pop up. Yeah, there's just so many ways to do that. And here we see, looks like Bill already having Sword of the Meek in his graveyard, allowing him to, it's not a combo that's as explosive as the one when you have Urza in play, but basically how this works is for each mana Bill has laying around, he can sacrifice a Sword of the Meek, make a 1/1, bring that sword back on equipped to the 1/1. So he's going to start to develop a pretty sizable air force, and this is going to chunk Austin Hoth down pretty quickly.
Yeah, and with the Ensnaring Bridge, the difference in power between Primeval Titan and these Thopter tokens is going to mean that Bill's Ensnaring Bridge can hold back Austin's Titan while still allowing his Thopters to attack in the air every turn.
Yeah, and I think pretty critically, the extra life Bill's gaining really does wonders to reduce how powerful a Dryad would be. Valakut's bolts, Bill's at 11 this turn. Pretty quickly, he's probably going to untap and go up to 17 or 18, and Austin can't afford to miss more than once or twice, with the math going at that rate.
Yeah. And also, it's not going to take too many turns for Austin to actually die. We have, 7 power in the air right now. And with the addition, if Bill wants to spend all of his mana making tokens over the next turn, then Austin might find himself dead on the board in just one more turn. Okay, so before combat there, Bill made a new token, taking the Sword of the Meek off of one of his attackable Thopters because only having one card in hand, an equipped token could not attack.
Yeah, a little bit of shortcutting there, but Bill just kind of doing it with a few less, movements around the board. With these players still in game one, making sure you can do what you can to speed up the game. It's going to be pretty important to make sure if you have 3 games, you can finish them all.
So it looks like the Goblin Engineer just brought back Welding Jar, I believe that is, to protect anything else in the combo. So Bill's not concerned about winning next turn. What he wants to do is make sure that he's safe, and that's certainly a defendable position that he's established now with explosives on the board, Welding Jar, Snaring Bridge, and anything that did get blown up, Goblin Engineer could potentially bring back next turn anyway.
Yeah, the lock is looking pretty robust at this point. Austin Hoth did pick up one of his really top-end utility lands in Field of the Dead, but unfortunately that really has no effect against a Ensnaring Bridge, and Bill's going to be making some extra Thopters end step, continuing to boost his life, and Austin sees the writing on the wall and then says, I think I'm done here.
Okay. All right, so Bill Caminos up a game here and looking good for a possible run to the top 8. We'll get the sideboards up here momentarily. There we are. So Bill Caminos up a game with 3 Veil of Summer, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Assassin's Trophy, 2 Abrupt Decay, 1 Dead of Winter, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Damping Sphere, and 3 Blood Moons. So there is some land hate available. What do you think? Do we like all of it? Do we want Blood Moon, Damping Sphere, and Trophy?
I think Damping Sphere is the one that I'm really kind of unsure on. It does kind of cut the mana from the bounce lands from 2 to 1 and takes those colors away, but I think that one seems a little bit low impact. The spell taxing I think is more likely to kind of stagger Bill than Austin. And if I was looking at that Wars of sideboard, the copies of Blood Moon, Thoughtseize, and maybe even Assassin's Trophy, I think Assassin's Trophy is reasonable, killing utility lands or Primeval Titan.
Yeah, I think so too. Blood Moon being really the ideal one though, is that I guess with Blood Moon and Dryad Elysian Grove in play, the mana is still going to function. However, the Dryad player wants. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the mana should function as as Austin, our amulet player, wants, but the lands do lose the abilities.
But the triggers will go away, yeah.
As someone who just barely failed my Rules Advisor test, you might not want to take my word for that. But looking at Austin's sideboard here, we see 1 copy of Engineered Explosives, 2 Aether Gust, 3 Mystical Dispute, 2 Beast Within, 1 Reclamation Sage, 1 Tireless Tracker, 2 copies of Dismember, and Force of Vigor. And looking at this, Force of Vigor is the one that really jumps off the page for me.
Yeah, I mean, it gets rid. Not only does it break up the combo, it basically gets rid of any sort of hate piece, lock piece that the Wurza deck is able to find. Force of Vigor can handle all of them, and at no mana if the situation calls for it.
Yeah, really fantastic card. I think it's the second most impactful Force we saw from Modern Horizons, and especially was showcased during the Hogak Summer of last year. I know I kept many hands where I played an Aether Vial on one after putting a Leyline into play, and the game ended immediately as soon as this card got cast.
Yeah, that just doesn't seem fair. But yeah, so Force of Vigor, real nice. Let's see, what else do we want? Reclamation Sage seems excellent.
Yeah, similarly, Beast Within, a nice catch-all answer, can break up the combo or kind of disassemble a lock. Even killing Urza is reasonable as well. And I'm not sure. I think Tireless Tracker is kind of an interesting one for me. Do you think the matchup could be grindy enough to really utilize that card well?
I think after having seen the Ensnaring Bridge draw out the first game, I think, yeah, it definitely is something you may want, especially now that we have a multitude of things that could potentially blow up Ensnaring Bridge or whatever other artifacts or enchantments are frustrating us. Yeah, the addition of the ability to draw more cards in a longer game seems like a nice addition for Austin's deck here.
Yeah, and it looks like our players should be about ready to go, so why don't we kick it down to the table and see how the second game goes, and hopefully we can get one that goes fast enough where both players can finish a game 3 if we do end up getting there. Okay, and actually just got word that this table was actually deck checked, so the players have a rather sizable extension, and time is maybe a little bit less of a priority than it first looked like. And it's actually kind of interesting, with the presence of Ensnaring Bridge available from Bill in his 4-color Wurza deck, I kind of, how much stock does that make Field of the Dead lose when the zombies can be invalidated so easily?
I mean, I think quite a bit. I don't know that the Amulet decks are really in a position that that's a card that you would ever board out, but definitely the zombies also are negated in the long run by a Thopter Sword player with a lot of mana. So there's really a couple ways where the Field of the Dead can be less useful than we're used to seeing. Although, on the other hand, Valakut seems great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of feel like Austin is going to have to be... Saying the aggressor is kind of a weird term, but I think that Austin is a player who wants the game to last about 5 turns. A quick Primeval Titan haste with Handwear Battlements being huge, and otherwise just trying to assemble that 2-part combo of Valakut and Dryad really seems like his best avenues to victory.
Yeah, and it does allow, if there's a non-comborific Urza on the board, it allows an avenue to kill that, or to do damage outside of combat when Ensnaring Bridge is locking things down. Yeah, that... It seems, and this is a matchup where the Valakut just seems to be much more important in the field. And I imagine are the deck lists? I haven't studied the deck list too carefully. Are they split evenly on those 2 cards?
It's actually hedged a little bit heavier towards Valakut with 2 copies towards the 1 Field of the Dead domain. And it's kind of, I think that makes sense. I actually watched a game where Austin played off camera. I talked about it a bit earlier. He was playing against humans. His opponent was at 20 life and Austin was at 1. And he got to the point where the board stalled. Eventually he drew a bounce land that he played 7 times to 21 his opponent.
Wow.
Valakut adds a whole new dimension. It's kind of the removal spell that you always wanted your Engineered Explosives to be, and it just syncs up perfectly with your prime times.
Yeah, so like we saw last game then, with the bounce land recast and just ending the game. All right, so we see Engineer putting Sword of the Meek in the graveyard. So that's 1/2 and the easier half to acquire for the Thopter Sword combo. Sword of the Meek, a card that's been in news in a few different formats. It's seen some Legacy play, some Modern play, and even going back a long time, I think I've seen some playing Extended also when kind of in the early stages or the late stages of that format. Sword of the Meek, an equipment that is almost never actually used to equip on regular creatures. +1/+2, equip costs 2 mana, and whenever you sacrifice, or whenever a 1/1 comes into play, if it's in the graveyard, it will return from the graveyard enchanting or equipped to that creature. most often finds itself sacrificed to Sword of the Meek to Thopter Foundry, which we see now assembled, or at least in the early stages of development on Bill's side of the board.
Yeah, all really that Bill needs to do here is find an artifact that he can use to kick off the combo. You don't want to sacrifice Thopter Foundry itself, because then you can't really continue doing it. And it's interesting. I was actually, curious. Bill's choice to get Sword immediately. It does make some sense seeing the Thopter Foundry, but that ensnaring bridge did a lot of work game one as well. So yeah, it looks like he's leaning into maybe a little bit of a faster angle. And what Bill is threatening with an Urza is actually just immediate infinite life.
And what Austin is threatening here is very early Valakut activations, or Valakut triggers. We're not quite there yet, at least for being able to double shoot, but Valakut is 5 other mountains in play. So briefly there for a moment we had 5 total land in play, but I believe we'll need a 6th land in order to then shoot for 6 damage. And we have a Force of Vigor. Well, that's just excellent.
Yeah, a little bit, on the medium side. Bill can sacrifice it in response, which will bring the sword back and equip. So, it does buy Austin some time. And with so many Valakut activations looming, I do think that's kind of mostly what he's interested in.
I wonder if there might have been a point where we could have timed that better. We'll see how Bill's next turn develops. But it would have been definitely ideal to strand that Sword of the Meek in the graveyard, at least for a brief period of time.
Wow, Bill actually drew Damping Sphere, which normally might not be fantastic, but Austin threatening Primeval Titan and having 2 bounce lands in play, I think is actually going to be seriously set back by this. That being said, we'll see if Bill has, he might even have a turn that he feels is better. So I would be really inclined to try and deny the Titan.
It's hard to come up with too much of, unless you're winning with Urza here, it's hard to come up with too much better turn than preventing Primeval Titan from coming onto the board.
And here we see Bill leading with Emery instead. Makes sense. This doesn't give yourself the, it doesn't sacrifice the ability to make this Damping Sphere, and also can potentially power up your Goblin Engineer, giving yourself more flexibility for stuff to occur. And yeah, there we see it. Another Thopter Foundry, and all Bill needs to do is kind of activate this Goblin Engineer one more time, and kind of the combo threat is back on the table.
Yeah, Austin's got a lot to deal with here. This Urza deck is now presenting offense and defense on several different angles, and this is something that, let's see, what's the best way we can handle this here? Was that another Force? No, that's a Once Upon a Time. Energy explosives on 2 would handle a fair amount of the pressure here, although the Emery could have, over time, built everything back up again.
Yeah, I think for Austin's side, you just want to make sure you get yourself a second green source again. Because right now, we saw Damping Sphere does turn off the color of mana if your land makes 2 or more. So right now, the Semi-Growth Chamber and Gruul Turf are just adding a single colorless, and Once Upon a Time does pick up a breeding pool and kind of maintains Austin's slow churn towards Primeval Titan next turn. And yeah, that being said, even though Damping Sphere does turn off the extra mana from lands, it doesn't stop Valakut, and that's a double shoot turn with a second Valakut getting played.
That is quite nice. That's going to allow the board to you control all the creatures, really, that Bill might be able to drop onto the board, and prevents the Goblin Engineer from, or really in the Emery, either one, from redeploying anything out of the graveyard.
Yeah, I do think it's a really interesting kind of, I don't know, it's just this Amulet Titan deck was able to kind of easily adapt and morph in the best part of some of the old red-green scape shift lists, and that's just, making a Prismatic Omen and just being a Valakut control deck. And it's interesting to see Austin put himself in a position to do this against a strategy that tends to be kind of a base control deck itself.
Now, I believe Bill has Assassin's Trophy he's lining up in his hand here, and probably considering what he wants to do with it. Knocking the Dryad out will shut down the Valakut triggers, which seems like a good place to go right now. Yeah,
and believe you see a Mystical Dispute available from Austin, but just a bit short on actually successfully countering this Assassin's Trophy. And, from his perspective, it's not terrible. He has to settle for a Primeval Titan this turn, but I think the cleanest way to victory is definitely with the Valakut's active, and that's going to force Austin to find a Pact or another copy of the 2/4.
Mm-hmm. So also going to limit Austin. The Ambisphere is going to prevent any double spelling anytime soon with all the Titans going to be ramping up the lands. But still, Bill is going to need something to deal with Primeval Titan attacking. It's not currently shut down like it was in the first game we jumped into. And turning out a bunch of Thopter tokens is great, but it's not going to really size up to the Primeval Titan. It's a big load coming in. So let's see. What do we actually have options here? Is Austin considering doing something besides playing the Titan?
I think he's debating if he wants to play his extra land Gemstone Mine before casting Primetime. That would enable Mystical Dispute to be cast if Bill has a counter. But the downside is you might be losing options on making extra zombies with field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, though, Bill making all these Thopters indicates that Austin might have passed the turn, and I guess I'm kind of a little bit lost as to why he wouldn't want to make
Are we sure there was a Primeval Titan? Yeah, it seems like playing it there seems like a pretty clear decision, and yet we have the dispute for the Urza. Which cannot be paid for. That would have been a game-winning Urza for sure.
Right, yeah. When you have both Urza as well as Sword of the Meek and Thopter Foundry, you have infinite mana, then that can give you infinite life and Thopters as well. So it doesn't end the game immediately, but functionally against Austin's deck would close it out.
Is there no... And it also lets you cast your whole deck. Is there... No, there is no win the game card in Bill's deck, so it would just be infinite value, and it is possible that wouldn't win the game, but in general you can expect that it would.
And I'm curious, I do see, that's a Primeval Titan pulled to the front, and looks like Austin is lining it up for this turn, so still gonna have to ask him about his decision not to cast it after the match here, because we do see a Gemstone Mine in hand, and it looks like in this situation, I think he's wisely saving it because he's interested at least a little bit in making some zombies, especially because there's no Ensnaring Bridge this game.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, this could have been done last turn and maintaining the ability to Mystical Dispute the Urza on Bill's turn. So it is interesting. I'm sure there is a good reason, or I'm sure there is a reason. Whether it's good or not remains to be seen. So we see the graveyard wiped. It doesn't matter too much right now, but it certainly could in the future.
Yeah, Wurza does lean into its graveyard quite a bit between the Goblin Engineer and Emery we saw this game, being a big part of that. Losing that access is not ideal, although, again, the Sword of the Meek is still on the battlefield, so the combo potential isn't really damaged.
All right, so now we have kind of Austin building up on multiple angles. We have Field of the Dead zombies showing up. We have Primeval Titan as a big attacker that can generate many more zombies next turn. I don't know that these Valakuts can even possibly trigger without another Dryad being found. But when you're thinning your deck may not matter too much, one fetch land at a time, but pulling 2 extra land out every turn definitely is going to have a major impact over the course of a long game.
Yeah, especially when Austin does have so many functional ways to make a Dryad. Once upon a time, increases your odds by a lot. Summoner's Pacts are still floating around as well. So I actually think Austin might also be sitting on a Summoner's Pact. I don't know if I caught it exactly, but that could enable pretty close to a kill this turn with the potential to have, make the Dryad, Primeval Titan attack, maybe even cast another Primeval Titan if his mana is that well developed.
Yeah. So we have a Whir on the upkeep for Bill Caminos. And this is probably finding Ensnaring Bridge to prevent the Titan and zombies from attacking. However, if it is a Summoner's Pact, that can then enable probably a Reclamation Stage to kill the Ensnaring Bridge if Austin feels like he can't just straight win with by fetching up a Dryad.
Yeah, and that's a tough balance. Giving up the Valakut to enable Primeval Titan attacks isn't a free exchange. But that being said, you have Field of the Dead in play. You can develop a lot of lands out. So removing the bridge, I actually think, can still be a path to victory. Right now, though, Bill is threatening, 6 power in play and the ability to make 3 more Thopters. So Austin might just have to go Dryad for kind of the board control route here.
Right, and this is using your land drop, losing your lightning bolts to kill tokens is not ideal, but it is. He needs to kill 2 tokens to survive next turn, which he can do easily.
Yeah, I think Austin has access to 4 lightning bolts this turn with an extra land off of Dryad and this growth chamber enabling some extra land drops.
So really, this seems like minimal. Or we're shooting on 1. It's actually 12 damage though. It's more than half of Bill's life total. But so if something like an Azusa were to be able to come off next turn, Austin might be able to just turn this game around real quick. But as of now, we're probably just going to have to pick off Thopters in order to stay alive.
Yeah, and it's rough. You know, the Damping Sphere here actually continuing to be relevant. Next turn, Austin's going to have to pay for that Summoner's Pact, which is going to use all of his green mana. I believe, because right now, I think there's only 3 that's not tied into Bounce Land. So that's going to stop another Primeval Titan from coming down and getting a big chunk of Valakut triggers. And yeah, so Austin able to have enough 3 damage Valakut triggers to exactly stop himself from dying. I think on board he's going to be living out 1 here.
Yeah, that's the way it looks.
So definitely not out of it. I think there are some green spells that he could cast that might be able to blow up the bridge next turn if he has those Beast Wizards, for example.
Bill, just 1 card left. But adding to the board here, also his life total is going up. Although if everything gets running for Austin, those Valakuts will probably end the game regardless if Bill's able to gain another half dozen life this turn.
Yeah, no. This is actually... Bill has another Sword of the Meek in hand, which in this situation he can't actually play it to equip because while that would provide lethal damage, it would take his hand size to being too small.
Yeah, that's funny. That's really close. Oh, no. No, was the win available? If we played the sword and equipped and then sacrificed the bridge to the Thopter Foundry, could we have gotten in for another point there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think Austin has anything to do about that. And yeah, I think Bill might have just been given Austin 1 extra turn. And I'm curious to see if Austin can use it, though, because he's still just kind of locked out of so many of his spells.
Right.
I guess that's not necessarily true, though. The Dryad actually allows everything to tap for green, so I take that back. Primeval Titan still at play here, and actually, yeah, I think, let's see, that's 1 trigger. Austin has no extra Valakuts.
That's 2. There's 2 Valakuts in play. So that was already 2 triggers, and this is 4 more triggers. Now we can gain how much life on Bill's side? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 more.
Yeah, and I believe Austin might still have the bounce land left in hand, though, and I don't think I think he's only made 1 land drop, so that's an extra 6 damage. Bill has 7 lands, but one of them is a Scalding Tarn, so that doesn't actually net him anymore.
That doesn't count, yeah.
I think this might still be precisely lethal. Oh, and Vesuva actually making extra Valakuts probably is going to put this a bit over the top, but... Wow, that was...
Yeah, so wait for the players to get a count for how much damage is being dealt exactly right now. Austin's showing his hand contains the land that I think Bill already knew about too, and yeah, so that was kind of a cool end of the game. Austin's deck does actually function right there at the end, and Bill might have let that one slip away a little bit by not realizing that the sacrificing his own snaring bridge would have allowed 1 more damage to come across.
Yeah, really tight margins. You know, it's a situation where oftentimes giving your opponent 1 turn might not make a difference in the game, but in that one, that's absolutely all Austin needed to kind of snatch that one away. And we're going to be having a game 3 here, and that's interesting. We saw a lot of good from Bill's deck. It seemed like he has all the tools to lock Austin down, and it's just there's just a few different angles of attack that this Primeval Titan deck can hit you from, and you kind of need answers to all of them to be able to win.
Yeah, it's just eventually just a long game. You just break through, and when you break through in this Amulet deck, you break through for 20 to the face, and you ignore the board. So I don't know that Bill can do a whole lot different. He kind of deployed the right cards. You were right. The Damping Sphere mattered, but it wasn't crucial. It wasn't enough by itself to turn the game around to lock down everything that was going on there.
And looks like our players are ready to go. Not a ton of sideboarding, it sounds like, based on player draw, which isn't a huge surprise. So we'll see our deciding Game 3 in this match between Austin Hoth and Bill Caminos. And yeah, if you're Austin, it's tough. Your opening hand in Amulet, typically you don't have that much room for hate cards to be floating around, but it is really critical to be able to find yourself maybe a Summoner's Pact that can get Reclamation Sage or maybe a copy of Beast Within.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Austin going down to 6 here. Bill looks content with his hand. We're just hearing time being called in the round. Maybe we can find out how much time these players have remaining. It's probably a reasonable amount. Okay, so it sounds like they have about 8 minutes left on their clock. Should be more than enough time for either player to win. However, it's not so much time that we couldn't end up in a draw if things get bogged down.
Yeah, both decks absolutely have some quick combo kill potential, but they sort of both have the tools to stop each other from doing it. So we actually see Bill with a few cheap artifacts in his opening hand, Mishra's Bauble and Pithing Needle. Let's see, what's the go-to name with Needle? I don't see a ton of things that immediately jump out to mind against Amulet.
Yeah, I don't have something. Nothing immediately comes to mind. There's, I guess, Engineering Explosives is something you could name to protect your own materials, but
maybe Sakura Tribe Scout is something.
Maybe,
but
yeah.
You almost don't want to develop it onto that until you can confirm that your opponent has one.
Yeah, it seems unlikely this is a Needle that's going to be played preemptively.
And if nothing else, though, it can serve as a mana source. Between Urza letting it tap for blue and the War of Invention, kind of the namesake card. Even in the cases where Needle looks like it does nothing, it can still have some effect.
Players still look like they're in a holding pattern, potentially waiting for us, waiting for them. Maybe there's a miscommunication here, but we'll see if we get things going as soon as we can. Okay, here we go. Bill with a Blood Moon in hand. That is a good one.
Yeah, very quickly becomes clear why Bill was excited to keep that hand with Blood Moon being shuffled to the front. And let's see. Looks like, I think, 3 land drops to make sure he can cast it. So even though Bill might not be roaring out of the gates, I mean, Amulet Titan is a deck that has, it's not like it's on a 0 basic plan. There are 3 total forests available, but I mean, if you can cast Blood Moon when your opponent has no forests, there's almost no way for them to get out of it.
Yeah, we'd be looking at that point just force of whatever the green force of green.
Yeah, vigor.
Yes,
green sounding word. Yeah, force of big or something. Would have worked this as well.
Force of green. Can't say force of nature, which seems like a nice one because that's actually a card. But okay, so here we go. Austin with just Once Upon a Time, and do we have anything? Oh, we do. We have a turn 2 play, and then leading into the Blood Moon. That's a really strong start. Almost whatever this is, unless it's a Sword Link.
Yeah, I think I saw a Goblin Engineer, which is a bit interesting because it forces you to fetch a red land, another thing that's not a basic. And, that's actually short your second blue mana to cast Urza. So, casting this Goblin Engineer, completely reasonable, but still has a bit of a price.
All right, and there we see it.
And yeah, curious again, Bill having some choices whether he wants to go kind of the combo route or continue his prison role. And looks like Sword of the Meek answers that pretty firmly.
Yeah.
He wants to cast Blood Moon, and he wants to be able to leverage some 1/1 attackers to end the game as fast as possible from there.
That's a good way to go. And we do see a second land from Austin, a second non-basic from Austin. It even comes into play tapped. I think we have a basic Swamp in hand for Bill also, which is nice.
And a basic.
Wow. There you go.
Normally we call that Tron. What do you call it when there's a 4th basic in your opener?
I don't know. It's almost Domain.
Yeah, if Bill doesn't end this game with a tribal flames to the face, I'll be very disappointed. And yeah, here we see Blood Moon. It's probably going to be the defining card of this game. Very simple, 2 in a red, non-basic lands are mountains. And right now, Austin Hoth has a nice pile of mountains and very likely a handful of stone uncastables.
Yeah, and we talked about how Dryad of Elysian Grove allows your lands to still tap for any color with Blood Moon in play, but it's very difficult to get the Dryad into play if the Blood Moon comes down first. Why not have a second one? So that's a nice backup for Bill, but we're going to go ahead and play a backup engineer first.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for Bill to hold on to the second Blood Moon, just to make sure he doesn't overextend himself into a potential force of vigor.
Right. I mean, the things that Energy Explosives does not seem very functional at the moment, but the things that Austin has that would kill a Blood Moon often are going to kill 2 at a time. And Thopter Foundry in play. We do not have the redundant artifact yet to start the actual combo.
Yeah, and looking at Bill's hand, I don't know if I see one there either. There's a third Goblin Engineer, a Pithing Needle.
The Pithing Needle.
Yep.
So, okay, so that's what it was for. It's just to throw away to start the combo.
It kind of reminds me of when Pack Rat was in Standard. People would put horrendous cards in the deck, like, well, I could always discard it to Pack Rat.
Sure, I mean, that same reasoning has been used for ages to justify bad blue cards in Force of Will decks. So there is the Needle, and it's immediately sacrificed for a token.
Wait a minute, you're not saying, Parasite Strix is a bad legacy play anymore, right?
Parasite Strix, that's a win condition. No, I'm talking about stuff like Guile.
Ooh, yeah.
Guile, I mean, 6 mana, 6/6, piece of junk, but it is blue. So if you can come up with a reason to avoid getting decked, you might as well play that one. And it's blue, you can pitch to Force of Will. It's great.
Checks out. You're the legacy expert, so I'll yield on that one.
That argument was made to me by Matt Nass about 9 years ago in Cephalid Reanimator sideboard. That you should be playing Guile because it solves this one corner case issue and pitches the Force of Will. And he wasn't wrong.
And yeah, in terms of the game we have before us, Austin's still kind of locked out. Bill is just kind of spitting out some Thopters, welding for a little bit of value. Kind of interesting. It's one of those where an extra Thopter doesn't speed up the clock by a ton here, but you do, I think, want to commit to maximizing your power on board or value. And with Austin currently unable to do anything, I think I just want to put the pedal to the metal and try and close in the smallest amount of draw steps possible.
Yeah, and we see one engineer joining the attack this turn. So it drops Austin to 14, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably it's going to be 2 more. So like you were saying, this Ether Spell Bomb, having this on the board right now may not be all that important. You see, that's a Force of Vigor, so Austin is going to be able to unlock his lands for a turn. And probably be able to do, well, he's going to need to be able to do quite a bit with them.
Yeah, and killing the Thopter Foundry as well as the Blood Moon, unfortunately, does not really accomplish a ton with the Goblin Engineer still in play, so the threat of the combo is still going to be there against Austin. But that being said, his mana is reasonably well developed. Another green source here actually does give Austin the chance to cast Primeval Titan.
So Bill's sacrificing the Thopter Foundry to itself in response to the Force. May as well pick up another token there. And the Blood Moon, the Hateful Enchantment is cleared away.
Yeah, so pretty critical from Austin. I don't know if there's any extra land drops floating around, but there's definitely Primeval Titan. Oh, and I think that's a Handwear Battlements, which is okay. It is a land drop, but still not the extra green source Austin needs here.
So this is on draw step, I believe, and Bill Caminos is going to Assassin's Trophy. The castle, I think, was indicated. Yes, and so this will shut down some of the mana production on Austin's likely only free turn this game without having a Blood Moon in play.
Yeah, and there is some downside, though. You do give your opponent a forest into your next Blood Moon, and that Assassin's Trophy actually showing off the power of Arkham's Astrolabe a little bit. Being cast here thanks to the 1-mana artifact, and I suspect that Astrolabe is almost going to be immediately welded away on Austin's end step here as well. And yeah, because one forest was given some room to breathe, Dryad of the Elysian Grove comes down, and that is going to kind of make the second Blood Moon almost textless. Austin getting a couple lane drops as well. Pretty big swing there. And I guess if you're in Bill's seat, how do you feel about casting that Assassin's Trophy knowing that the rest of your plan might be Blood Moon?
That's tough. I don't know. I mean, because if a Primeval Titan came down, Austin would have the chance to search out basics anyway, although there's no guarantee that he actually would do that. So I feel like it's hard to convince yourself, even if it's right, it's hard to convince yourself that letting your opponent cast Primeval Titan is a good idea. So I don't have any fault in Bill going to the castle there, although definitely you could make a case that it shouldn't have happened.
And here we see a Thought Seeds from Bill, revealing a hand of Primeval Titan, Reclamation Sage, and Mystical Dispute. Bill pretty quickly takes the Titan, and Austin's kind of leftover hate cards, looking a little bit anemic. The Primeval Titan really threatened a lot with the Dryad, and now that that's been taken away, Austin's kind of reactive hand is pretty poor against the Double Welder, giving tons of resiliency to any interaction.
It does mean that the second Blood Moon is not going to accomplish a whole lot against that Reclamation Sage, so Bill may decide not even to deploy it here.
Yeah, I think I like not casting it quite a bit. It just, effectively just gives you multiple extra Thopters instead.
Right, yeah, you get 3 tokens instead. And Austin's down to 10. Well, drawing a Summer's Pact here. Let's see. Well, are we pausing? Bill's going to consider responding, maybe.
Yeah, there is some potential. Aether Spellbomb can be sacrificed for a redraw. Might be Bill just doing a little bit of Hollywooding to put some fear into Austin. Whether there's some potential for a card like Aether Gust or
right.
Some type of counterspell here.
Even a word for Damping Sphere would actually, because of the Summoner's Pact, might actually prevent the Titan from being cast. But it doesn't appear that we're going to see anything out of Bill. And what is Austin going to be able to do here? We have the Dryad in play, so Titan can, at its most basic level, just get 2 Valakutes and shoot 4 times.
Yeah, which lets you clear the engineers and remove the redundancy and take a bite out of the Thopter presence on the battlefield. So we'll see what Primeval Titan goes after. And Austin also has to consider, let's see, what if the Titan dies immediately? Like, what's the best lands to get, to kind of maximize that?
Right. So killing the engineers, even if we're just getting 1 Valakut, killing the engineers means that the Reclamation Sage killing, for example, the Thopter Foundry, the next turn, it would unlikely be able to return. Although I'm not sure, with the number of tokens that we generate off of that, I'm not sure Austin could survive the Air Force that already be created. So this is definitely, he's taking his time here, which is a good idea because there's a lot to consider.
Yeah, I think he's kind of weighing the options of, is picking up a bounce land and a single Valakut more triggers in the long run? Because, Austin, his last 2 cards are not lands. And while his deck is about half, lands that are going to trigger these Valakuts at this point, you kind of have to choose between a little bit of high upside versus floor here. And we actually see Simic, Growth Chamber, and Valakut, and maybe actually picking up a Talaria West here.
Well, that certainly gives us the most options for our next turn, although we're actually going to be able to counter the Valakut triggers because we're using the Dryad to cheat on the mountains, and the Dryad can just be forced out of play. So nice response there by Bill.
Yeah, really heady thing to do. If you're Austin, I think you do kind of have to give your opponent an opportunity to make a mistake there. And Bill decided to sit on the Aether Spellbomb for as long as he could, kind of nullified that first set of Valakuts, and the pressure's still on. He's going to be facing down potentially multiple triggers next turn when the Dryad gets recast, but that did buy him some nice time.
Yeah, and playing the Spellbomb definitely turned out to be a wise decision for Bill, and it actually just comes right back into play due to the Goblin Engineer. So usually we're seeing Thopter Sword just generate attackers, but here it's generating actual cards as the tokens are exchanged for artifacts from the graveyard with the engineers.
Yeah, Infinite Spellbomb is actually pretty fantastic, and it's weird to think that creature removal is capable of turning off Valakut, but that's just sort of the world that we live in with Dryad being a centerpiece.
So I'm sure Bill is going to want to be able to set up to be able to kill Austin in 1 more turn after this one. I don't think we're, based on especially on how we lost last game, I think we have 5 in the air right now, and we're definitely not going to want to skip at least being able to make a couple more tokens in case something happens, like tokens being shot down, even if the spell bomb seems like it's going to prevent a lot of that. Okay, so spell bomb bounces the Titan as well.
Yeah, and I think
then replay the Blood Moon. Okay, that was a good turn for Bill.
Yeah, because it's a really, I think, heads-up thing to do. Just knowing that even though there's a Reclamation Sage there, Austin is locked under a pact, so he has to pay for that. That's going to stop the Reclamation Sage from killing the Moon this turn, and that means the Primeval Titan is at most coming, 2 or 3 turns down the lane.
Right, and this might just have bought Bill Caminos a free enough time for one more free attack. Excellent game. That was a good match to watch.
Yeah, really nice. It was good to see Bill come back from a potentially game kind of costing error in game 2, keeping his just staying focused mentally, making sure everything was under wraps, and finding some pretty clever lines to end up taking the match.
Yeah, that was. Okay, sounds like we are well past time this round because those players did have an extension. So we're going to be stepping away and then stepping right back in momentarily for round 7.